The stagecoach rattled into Old Tucson, Arizona, on a scorching afternoon in July of 1878, carrying a woman who had left everything behind except the clothes on her back and a small leather satchel that held her entire life. Olivia Zimmerman pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, watching the desert town materialize through the heat waves that shimmered off the packed earth streets. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from the oppressive heat that made her cotton dress cling to her skin, but from the knowledge that somewhere back in St. Louis, her past was still searching for her. The driver's gruff voice called out as the horses slowed, their hooves kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the still air. Olivia gathered her belongings, her fingers trembling slightly as she clutched the handle of her satchel. She had been traveling for nearly 3 weeks, moving from one town to another, always looking over her shoulder, always expecting to see the cold eyes of Marcus Thornhill's hired men. But Marcus was dead now, killed in a gambling dispute that had nothing to do with her, though she had been blamed for it nonetheless. His brother Richard had sworn vengeance, convinced that Olivia had orchestrated the entire thing to free herself from an unwanted engagement. The truth was far simpler and far more complicated than Richard could imagine, but he would never believe her, and she had no intention of waiting around to see what kind of justice his wealth and influence could buy. The stagecoach door swung open, and Olivia stepped down onto the wooden platform, grateful to have solid ground beneath her feet again. The heat hit her like a physical force, and she raised one hand to shade her eyes from the relentless sun. Old Tucson sprawled before her, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden storefronts that seemed to have grown organically from the desert itself. Men in wide-brimmed hats moved through the streets, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the rhythmic sound of a blacksmith's hammer against anvil. "End of the line, miss," the driver said, handing down her small trunk. "You got family here?" "No," Olivia replied, forcing a smile that she hoped appeared confident rather than terrified. "But I am looking for employment. I was told there might be opportunities here for a woman with experience in teaching and bookkeeping." The driver scratched his weathered jaw, his eyes sympathetic. "Well, you might try the hotel. Mrs. Patterson runs the place, and she is always looking for help. Otherwise, there is the general store, or maybe one of the ranches outside town might need someone to teach their young ones." Olivia thanked him and watched as the stagecoach pulled away, taking with it her last connection to the world she had known. She picked up her trunk, surprised by how light it felt, how few possessions she had managed to salvage from her old life. Everything that had mattered once, the fine dresses, the jewelry, the books she had collected, all of it had been left behind. She had taken only what she could carry and what would not draw attention. The hotel stood at the corner of the main street, a 2-story building with a wide porch that offered a sliver of shade. Olivia made her way there, acutely aware of the stares she received. She supposed she must look out of place in this rough frontier town, her traveling dress too fine despite the dust that covered it, her posture too proper for a place where survival mattered more than social graces. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a sturdy woman in her 50s with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Olivia up and down with an appraising gaze that made the younger woman feel as if every secret she carried had been laid bare. "I am looking for work," Olivia said, keeping her voice steady. "The stagecoach driver suggested you might need help." "What kind of help?" Mrs. Patterson's voice was neutral, revealing nothing of her thoughts. "I can keep books, manage accounts. I have experience with correspondence and organization. I can also teach if there is need for that." Mrs. Patterson was silent for a moment, her eyes still studying Olivia with that unsettling intensity. "You running from something?" The directness of the question caught Olivia off guard, but she knew better than to lie. This woman would see through any deception in an instant. "I am running from someone," she admitted. "But I have committed no crime. I simply need a fresh start, somewhere I can work and build a new life." "The law looking for you?" "No, madam. Just a man who blames me for something I did not do." Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly, as if this answer satisfied her. "I can use someone to help with the books and manage the front desk when I am occupied elsewhere. The pay is not much, but it includes a room and meals. You will work long hours and some of the guests can be difficult. But you will be safe here, and I do not tolerate any nonsense in my establishment." Relief flooded through Olivia so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you. I will work hard, I promise you that. See that you do. Come on, I will show you to your room." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. Olivia set down her trunk and sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to breathe. She had made it. She was safe, at least for now. Tomorrow she would start her new position, and perhaps in time, she could truly begin to rebuild her life. That evening, Olivia ate dinner in the hotel's small dining room, trying to appear invisible as she observed the other guests. Most were travelers passing through, rough men who spoke in loud voices about cattle prices and water rights. But there was one man who caught her attention, not because he was loud or boisterous, but because of the quiet confidence with which he carried himself. He sat alone at a corner table, his hat pushed back to reveal dark hair and sun-bronzed features that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. He was tall, she could tell even though he was seated, with broad shoulders and hands that looked equally capable of gentleness and strength. There was something about the way he moved, economical and purposeful, that spoke of a man who had learned to survive in unforgiving country. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and their eyes met across the room. Olivia quickly looked away, heat rushing to her cheeks. She had not meant to stare, had not meant to draw any attention to herself at all. But when she risked another glance, she found he was still watching her, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He stood and walked over to her table, moving with that same easy grace. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like the ocean she had seen once as a child. "Evening, miss. I don't believe I have seen you in Old Tucson before." "I only arrived today," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice cool and professional. The last thing she needed was to attract the attention of some local cowboy, no matter how handsome he might be. "Nathan Parker," he said, offering his hand. "I run a ranch about 10 miles north of here." She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, and she found herself noticing the calluses on his palms, the evidence of hard work. "Olivia Zimmerman. Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman. Are you visiting family, or are you new to the territory?" "I've taken a position here at the hotel," she said, carefully omitting any details that might reveal too much. "I am to help Mrs. Patterson with the books and the front desk." That is good news for Mrs. Patterson. She has been looking for reliable help for months now. He paused, and something in his expression shifted, became more serious. "If you do not mind me saying, you look like you could use a friend in this town. Old Tucson is a good place, but it can be rough for newcomers, especially women on their own." There was no presumption in his words, no suggestion of anything improper. He was simply stating a fact, and Olivia found herself appreciating his straightforwardness. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Parker. I assure you I am quite capable of taking care of myself." "I do not doubt that for a moment," he said with a smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more approachable. "But the offer of friendship stands nonetheless. If you ever need anything, supplies for the hotel or just someone to talk to who is not passing through on their way to somewhere else, you can find me at the Parker Ranch. Anyone in town can give you directions." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. "Mr. Parker, I hope you are not bothering my new employee. Just introducing myself, Mrs. Patterson. I will leave Miss Zimmerman to her dinner." He tipped his hat to both women and returned to his table, leaving Olivia feeling oddly unsettled by the encounter. "That one is trouble," Mrs. Patterson said in a low voice, though there was a hint of affection beneath the warning. "Not bad trouble, mind you. Nathan Parker is as decent a man as you will find in this territory, but he has a way of making women forget their good sense. You remember why you are here and what you are running from." "I have no interest in romance, Mrs. Patterson," Olivia said firmly. "I am here to work and nothing more." "Good. Keep it that way." But as the older woman walked away, Olivia could not help but glance once more at Nathan Parker, wondering what circumstances had brought a man like him to this remote corner of the Arizona territory. The next morning, Olivia began her duties at the hotel. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a demanding but fair employer, and Olivia threw herself into the work with a dedication that surprised even herself. She reorganized the account books, updated the guest registry system, and managed the front desk with an efficiency that quickly won Mrs. Patterson's approval. The work was exhausting, but Olivia welcomed it. When she was busy, she had no time to think about Richard Thornhill or the life she had left behind. 3 days after her arrival, Nathan Parker returned to the hotel. Olivia was at the front desk, reviewing a supplier's invoice, when she heard his familiar voice greeting Mrs. Patterson. She looked up to find him standing in the lobby, dusty from travel and carrying a worn saddlebag over one shoulder. "Good afternoon, Miss Zimmerman," he said, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "I see Mrs. Patterson has you working hard already, Mr. Parker." She inclined her head, trying to ignore the way her heart had suddenly started beating faster. "Do you require a room, just for tonight? I have business in town tomorrow morning, and I would rather not make the ride back to the ranch in the dark." Olivia turned to the registry, very aware of his presence on the other side of the desk. She could smell dust and leather and something else, something that reminded her of wide open spaces and freedom. "We have a room on the second floor available. Will that suit you?" "That will be fine." He signed the registry, and she noticed that his handwriting was surprisingly neat, the letters carefully formed. "Miss Zimmerman, I was wondering if you might join me for dinner this evening. There is a restaurant down the street that serves a decent meal, and I thought you might enjoy getting away from the hotel for a few hours." Olivia opened her mouth to refuse, but something in his expression stopped her. There was hope there, but also a vulnerability that she had not expected to see in a man who seemed so confident. And beneath her initial impulse to say no, she realized that she wanted to accept. It had been so long since anyone had offered her simple kindness without wanting something in return. "I would need to ask Mrs. Patterson if I can be spared," she said carefully. "Already done," Mrs. Patterson said from the doorway, making both of them jump. She had a knowing look on her face that made Olivia suspicious. "You have been working yourself to the bone since you arrived. A few hours away will do you good. Just be back by 10. I do not run that kind of establishment." Olivia wanted to protest, to explain that she had not been angling for time off, but Mrs. Patterson had already disappeared into the back room. She turned back to Nathan, who was watching her with an expression of barely suppressed amusement. "It seems I have been given permission," she said, trying to sound more reluctant than she felt. 6 o'clock, he suggested. 6 o'clock, she agreed, and tried to ignore the flutter of anticipation in her chest. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Olivia found herself distracted, making small errors in her calculations that she had to correct. When 6 o'clock finally arrived, she had changed into her only other decent dress, a simple blue cotton that she hoped was appropriate for dinner in a frontier town. She studied her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand, noting the way the journey had left her face thinner, her eyes shadowed. But there was also something new there, a hint of strength that had not been present before. Nathan was waiting in the lobby, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt. He smiled when he saw her, and Olivia felt that strange flutter in her chest again. "You look lovely," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. They walked through the dusty streets as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The restaurant was a modest establishment, but it was clean, and the smell of cooking food made Olivia realize how hungry she was. They were seated at a table near the window, and Nathan ordered for both of them beef stew and fresh bread that arrived steaming hot. "Tell me about your ranch," Olivia said, wanting to steer the conversation away from herself and her reasons for being in Old Tucson. Nathan's face lit up, and she could see the passion he felt for his land. "I started the Parker Ranch 5 years ago with money I saved working as a ranch hand and a bit of luck from a poker game. It is not much yet, just a few hundred acres and a couple dozen head of cattle, but it has potential. The land has good water access and there is plenty of grazing. My goal is to build it into something sustainable, something I can be proud of. You run it alone." "I have 2 men who work for me, Miguel and his son Carlos. Good people, hard workers. Miguel has forgotten more about cattle than I will ever know, and Carlos has a gift with horses. Between the 3 of us we manage." He paused, studying her face. "What about you, Miss Zimmerman? What brought you to Old Tucson?" Olivia had known the question would come eventually, but she still was not prepared for it. She set down her spoon, considering how much to reveal. "I needed a fresh start," she said finally. "The life I had before was not the one I wanted. Was there a man involved?" She looked up sharply, but there was no judgment in his eyes, only curiosity and perhaps a hint of concern. "There was. A man I was engaged to, though not by my choice. His family and mine had arranged it, and I went along with it because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. But he was killed and his brother blamed me for it. I had nothing to do with his death, but Richard would not hear the truth. I left before he could act on his accusations. So you are innocent." It was a statement, not a question, and the certainty in Nathan's voice surprised her. "Yes. But I have no way to prove it, and Richard Thornhill has money and connections. If he finds me, it will not matter whether I am innocent or not." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. "You are safe here," he said finally. "Old Tucson may be rough around the edges, but we look after our own. And if this Richard fellow shows up, he will find that frontier justice works differently than what he is used to back east. I do not want anyone fighting my battles for me, Mr. Parker. Nathan, please. And I am not suggesting you need rescuing. But you should know that you are not alone anymore. That matters out here." The sincerity in his words touched something deep inside Olivia, some frozen place that had begun to thaw. She had been so focused on survival, on running and hiding, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer genuine support. "Thank you, Nathan. That means more than you know." They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily as they discovered shared interests and perspectives. Nathan told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17 and striking out on his own. Olivia shared carefully edited stories of her childhood in St. Louis, of her love for books and learning, of the small rebellions that had marked her life in a society that expected women to be ornamental and obedient. When Nathan walked her back to the hotel, the streets were quiet, and the air had cooled to something almost comfortable. They stood on the porch for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "I would like to see you again," Nathan said, "if that would be acceptable to you." Olivia knew she should say no. She had come to Old Tucson to escape her past, not to complicate her life with a new relationship. But as she looked at Nathan, at the hope and warmth in his eyes, she found herself unable to refuse. "I would like that too." He smiled, that transformative smile that made her heart skip. "I will be back in town in a few days. Perhaps we could have dinner again." "Perhaps we could," she agreed, and went inside before she could change her mind. Over the following weeks, Nathan became a regular presence in Olivia's life. He came to town more frequently than his ranch business required, and each time he made a point of spending time with her. They took walks through Old Tucson in the evening when the heat had abated, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan showed her the desert, teaching her to appreciate its harsh beauty, pointing out the plants and animals that thrived in this unforgiving environment. Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits, found herself thinking about him during the quiet moments when she was alone with her account books. Mrs. Patterson watched this developing relationship with a mixture of amusement and concern. "You are falling for him," she said one evening when Olivia returned from a walk with Nathan, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. "I am not," Olivia protested, but even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. "There is nothing wrong with it, girl. Nathan Parker is a good man, one of the best, but you need to be honest with him about your past. If this Richard Thornhill is as dangerous as you suggest, Nathan deserves to know what he might be getting into." Olivia knew Mrs. Patterson was right, but the thought of telling Nathan the whole truth terrified her. What if he decided she was too much trouble? What if he walked away? She had begun to care for him deeply, more deeply than she had intended, and the thought of losing him was almost unbearable. The decision was taken out of her hands 3 weeks after her arrival in Old Tucson. Olivia was working at the front desk when a stranger entered the hotel. He was well dressed in Eastern fashion, his suit too heavy for the Arizona heat, his face pale beneath a fashionable hat. But it was his eyes that sent a chill down Olivia's spine, cold and calculating eyes that swept the lobby before settling on her. "I am looking for a woman," he said, his voice clipped and precise. "Brown hair, green eyes, about 5.5 feet tall." She would have arrived within the past month or so, traveling alone. Olivia kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. "We see many travelers here, sir. Perhaps if you told me the woman's name," she might be using an alias. "Her real name is Olivia Zimmerman, and she is wanted in connection with a murder in St. Louis." The lie was so bold, so absolute, that Olivia felt her knees go weak. Richard had not just accused her, he had fabricated evidence, had turned her flight into proof of guilt. "I am sorry, but I cannot help you," she managed to say. "Now, if you are not in need of a room, I must ask you to leave." The man's eyes narrowed, and she knew he had recognized her. He had been testing her, and she had failed. "My employer is offering a substantial reward for information leading to Miss Zimmerman's capture. $500. I will be staying at the boarding house down the street if anyone should happen to remember seeing her." He left, and Olivia stood frozen behind the desk, her hands gripping the wood so tightly her knuckles turned white. $500 was a fortune in Old Tucson. Someone would talk, Someone would remember the well-dressed stranger who had arrived on the stagecoach and taken a position at the hotel. It was only a matter of time. Mrs. Patterson appeared from the back room, her face grim. "I heard. You need to leave town tonight if possible." "But where would I go? If Richard has sent investigators here, he will have sent them everywhere. There is nowhere I can run that he will not find me eventually." "Then maybe it is time to stop running." The voice came from the doorway, and Olivia turned to see Nathan standing there, his expression serious. "I came by to see if you wanted to take a ride out to the ranch tomorrow, but it seems we have a more immediate problem." "Nathan, you do not understand. This man, the investigator, he said I am wanted for murder. Richard has fabricated evidence, and if he finds me, I will be taken back to St. Louis to stand trial. I will not survive it." Nathan crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "Then we will not let him find you. Come to the ranch with me tonight. You will be safe there and we can figure out what to do next. I cannot drag you into this. It is too dangerous." "Olivia, look at me." She did, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. "I know we have only known each other a short time, but I care about you. More than I should, probably. I am not going to stand by and watch you be hauled off for something you did not do. Now, are you going to come with me, or am I going to have to throw you over my shoulder and carry you?" Despite everything, Olivia felt a smile tug at her lips. "You would not dare try me." "Let her go," Mrs. Patterson said. "I will handle things here. If anyone asks, you gave notice and left town heading east. That should buy you some time." Olivia looked between the two of them, these people who had become so important to her in such a short time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." Within an hour, Olivia was mounted on a horse behind Nathan, her few possessions secured in his saddlebags. They rode out of Old Tucson under cover of darkness, heading north toward the Parker Ranch. Olivia clung to Nathan's waist, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them and the solid warmth of Nathan's back against her chest. The desert at night was a different world, cool and mysterious, filled with sounds she could not identify. But she felt safe, safer than she had in months because Nathan was with her. The ranch appeared as the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern horizon. It was modest, as Nathan had said, but there was something solid and enduring about the collection of buildings that rose from the desert floor. The main house was adobe with a wooden porch, and there were several outbuildings including a barn and what looked like a bunkhouse. In the growing light, Olivia could see the dark shapes of cattle grazing in the distance. Nathan helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist for a moment longer than necessary. "Welcome to the Parker Ranch," he said. "It is not much, but it is home." "It is wonderful," Olivia said honestly. After weeks of running and hiding, the ranch felt like a sanctuary. A man emerged from the barn, older with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of a life spent outdoors. He looked at Olivia with curiosity but no suspicion. "Nathan, you did not mention you would be bringing a guest." "Miguel, this is Miss Olivia Zimmerman. She is going to be staying with us for a while. Olivia, this is Miguel Cortez, the man who actually keeps this ranch running despite my best efforts to mess things up." Miguel smiled at the joke, his eyes kind. "Welcome, Miss Zimmerman. Any friend of Nathan's is welcome here." "Thank you, Mr. Cortez. I hope I will not be too much trouble." "No trouble at all. We could use a woman's touch around here." The house has been looking pretty rough since Nathan decided he could manage without help. Nathan showed Olivia into the house, apologizing for its condition, but Olivia found it charming in its simplicity. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace dominating one wall. There were 2 bedrooms, and Nathan immediately gave her the larger one, insisting he would be fine in the smaller room. "I know this is not what you are used to," he said, looking suddenly uncertain. "But you will be safe here. Miguel and Carlos will not say anything to anyone, and the ranch is far enough from town that no one is likely to come out here looking for you." "It is perfect," Olivia said, and meant it. "Nathan, I do not know how to thank you for this." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender that it made her breath catch. "You do not need to thank me. Just promise me something, anything. Promise me you will stop looking over your shoulder all the time. Promise me you will let yourself be happy here, even if it is just for a little while." Tears stung Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I promise." The days that followed were unlike anything Olivia had experienced before. She threw herself into life on the ranch, determined to earn her keep. She took over the cooking, which had been a haphazard affair managed by whichever of the three men happened to be near the house at mealtime. She cleaned and organized the house, transforming it from a bachelor's rough dwelling into something warmer and more welcoming. She even helped with some of the lighter ranch work, feeding the chickens and tending the small vegetable garden that had been neglected for too long. But more than the work, Olivia found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life. She loved the quiet mornings when she would watch the sun rise over the desert, painting the sky in impossible colors. She loved the evenings when they would all gather around the table for dinner, sharing stories and laughter. And most of all, she loved the time she spent with Nathan, the long conversations on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed, the shared glances across the table, the accidental touches that sent electricity through her entire body. Nathan was different here on his ranch. There was a confidence and ease to him that she had only glimpsed in town. He was a natural leader, and both Miguel and Carlos clearly respected him. But he also worked harder than anyone, always the first up in the morning and the last to bed at night. Olivia watched him with the horses, patient and firm, watched him mending fences under the brutal sun, watched him studying his account books by lamplight, and she felt her admiration growing into something deeper and more profound. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Nathan asked if she would like to go for a ride. They saddled 2 horses and headed out across the rangeland, riding in comfortable silence as the sun began its descent. Nathan led them to a small rise that overlooked the ranch and the desert beyond. From here, Olivia could see for miles in every direction, the land stretching out in an endless expanse of browns and golds and muted greens. "I come here sometimes when I need to think," Nathan said, dismounting and helping Olivia down. "It helps put things in perspective." They sat on the warm rocks, shoulders almost touching, and watched as the sky transformed into a masterpiece of color. Olivia felt a sense of peace settling over her, a feeling she had not experienced in so long she had almost forgotten what it was like. "Olivia," Nathan said, and something in his voice made her turn to look at him. "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race, though she could not say whether it was from fear or anticipation. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back and could no longer contain them. "I know it is too soon, and I know you are dealing with so much already. But I cannot keep pretending that what I feel is just friendship or concern for your safety. Every moment I spend with you makes me realize how empty my life was before you came into it. And I need you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what we have to face with this Richard Thornhill situation, I am not going anywhere. I am here, and I am yours if you want me." Olivia stared at him, her mind racing. She should be cautious, should hold back, should protect herself and him from the complications her presence would inevitably bring. But as she looked into his eyes and saw the raw honesty there, she realized that she had been in love with him for weeks now, maybe from the very first moment he had smiled at her in the hotel dining room. "I love you too," she whispered, and watched his face transform with joy. "I have been trying so hard not to, trying to convince myself that it was impossible, that I had no right to drag you into my mess. But I do love you, Nathan. I love you so much it terrifies me." He reached for her then, pulling her close and kissing her with a passion that made the world disappear. Olivia melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair as she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing and fear and hope that had been building inside her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We will figure this out," he promised. "I do not care how powerful this Richard Thornhill is or how much money he has. We will find a way to clear your name and build a life together." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I have to be. Because the alternative is unacceptable." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise and a vow. "Marry me, Olivia. I know it is fast and I know we are facing obstacles that would make most people give up. But I do not care. I want you as my wife. I want to build this ranch with you, to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. Say yes." Olivia knew she should be practical, should point out all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. But all she could think about was how right it felt to be in Nathan's arms, how much she wanted the future he was offering. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Miguel and Carlos as witnesses. Olivia wore a simple dress that she had sewn herself from fabric Nathan had brought from town, and Nathan wore his best shirt and trousers. There was no official minister, so Miguel performed the ceremony in Spanish and English, his words simple but profound. When Nathan slipped a plain gold band onto Olivia's finger, she felt as if she had finally found her home. That night, in Nathan's bed that was now their bed, they came together with a tenderness and passion that left Olivia breathless. Nathan was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they finally joined, Olivia felt as if all the broken pieces of herself were finally being made whole. She lay in his arms afterward, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a happy ending. But happiness on the frontier was always fragile, always threatened. 2 weeks after their wedding, Carlos came riding back to the ranch at full gallop, his horse lathered with sweat. Nathan and Olivia were working in the garden when they heard him calling, and they both ran to meet him. "3 men rode into town this morning," Carlos said, his young face worried. Well-dressed, asking questions about the ranch and about a woman matching Olivia's description. "Mrs. Patterson sent word. She said they are planning to ride out here tomorrow." Nathan's jaw tightened and Olivia felt fear clutch at her heart. "How many men?" "3 that Carlos saw, but there could be more," Miguel said, coming to join them. "What do you want to do, Nathan?" "We prepare," Nathan said grimly. "If they want to fight, we will give them one. But we do it smart. Miguel, take Olivia up to the old line shack in the hills. It is hidden well enough that they will never find it, and there is enough supplies up there to last a few days. Carlos and I will stay here and deal with these men." "No," Olivia said firmly. "I am not going to hide while you risk your life for me. This is my problem, Nathan. I should be the one to face it." "Olivia, these men are dangerous, and so am I when someone threatens the people I love." She looked at him, willing him to understand. "I have been running for months, letting fear dictate every decision I make. But I am done running. If Richard's men want to take me back to St. Louis, they will have to go through me first, and I will not go quietly." Nathan studied her face for a long moment, and Olivia could see the conflict in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but we do this together and we do it smart. We are not looking for a gunfight. We are going to settle this with words if possible." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Nathan cleaned and loaded his rifle and pistol, and Miguel did the same. Olivia had never fired a gun in her life, but Nathan gave her a quick lesson with a pistol, showing her how to aim and pull the trigger. She hoped desperately that she would not need to use it. The men arrived just after noon the next day, 3 of them riding horses that looked too fine for the rough Arizona territory. The leader was the same man who had come to the hotel, the investigator with the cold eyes. The other 2 were clearly hired muscle, big men with guns on their hips and expressions that suggested they knew how to use them. Nathan stood on the porch with Olivia at his side, Miguel and Carlos flanking them. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip, but he made no move to draw it. "This is private property," he called out. "State your business." The investigator reined in his horse, his eyes fixed on Olivia. "We are here for the woman. She is wanted in St. Louis for murder. Hand her over and there will be no trouble." "The woman you are referring to is my wife," Nathan said, his voice hard as iron. "And she is not going anywhere with you. This is not your concern, Mr. Parker. We have legal authority to take her back to Missouri to stand trial. Legal authority." Olivia stepped forward, her voice ringing with anger and years of suppressed fury. "You mean the false charges that Richard Thornhill fabricated because he could not accept that I refused to mourn a man who made my life miserable. I did not kill Marcus Thornhill. He died in a gambling dispute, shot by a man named James Sullivan over a crooked card game. There were a dozen witnesses, and not one of them mentioned my name." The investigator's expression did not change. "That is for the courts to decide. My job is simply to bring you back." "And my job is to protect my wife," Nathan said. "So here is how this is going to work. You are going to turn around and ride back to town. Then you are going to send a wire to Richard Thornhill and tell him that if he wants to press charges against Olivia, he can do it through proper legal channels. But he is not taking my wife anywhere based on nothing but his word. You are interfering with a legal investigation." "No, I am protecting an innocent woman from a vindictive man with money. There is a difference." Nathan's hand moved to rest more obviously on his pistol. "Now I am asking you nicely to leave, but if you force the issue, we will settle this another way. Your choice." The tension stretched taut as a wire, and Olivia held her breath. The 2 hired men looked nervous, their hands hovering near their guns but not quite drawing. The investigator stared at Nathan, clearly trying to assess whether he was bluffing. Finally, something in Nathan's eyes must have convinced him, because he reined his horse around. "This is not over," he said coldly. "Richard Thornhill does not give up easily." "Neither do I," Nathan replied. "You tell him that if he comes after my wife again, he will have to deal with me. And I do not think he will like the results." They watched as the 3 men rode away, waiting until they were nothing but dust clouds on the horizon before anyone moved. Then, Olivia's legs gave out, and she would have fallen if Nathan had not caught her. He held her tight and she buried her face in his chest, shaking with relief and residual fear. "It is all right," he murmured into her hair. "They are gone. You are safe." "For now," Olivia said. "But he meant what he said, Nathan. This is not over. Richard will come back, and next time he might bring the law with him. Then we will be ready. But in the meantime, we are going to take a different approach." Nathan pulled back to look at her face. "We are going to clear your name. We are going to find this James Sullivan and get him to testify about what really happened. And we are going to make sure that Richard Thornhill can never threaten you again." Over the following weeks, Nathan set his plan in motion with a determination that awed Olivia. He traveled to Old Tucson and sent wires to contacts he had in Missouri, asking questions and gathering information. He hired a lawyer from Tucson, a sharp-eyed man named Benjamin Crawford, who specialized in cases involving fraudulent charges. And slowly, painstakingly, they began to piece together the truth of what had happened the night Marcus Thornhill died. It turned out that James Sullivan had fled Missouri after the shooting, fearing retaliation from the powerful Thornhill family. But Nathan's contacts tracked him down in Kansas City, and with Benjamin Crawford's help, they convinced him to provide a sworn statement detailing the events of that night. Sullivan had shot Marcus Thornhill in self-defense after Marcus had tried to kill him over a card game where Marcus had been caught cheating. There had been witnesses, as Olivia had said, but Richard Thornhill had used his money and influence to silence them or drive them away. With Sullivan's testimony and corroborating statements from several of the witnesses who had been pressured to leave St. Louis, Benjamin Crawford built a case that not only exonerated Olivia, but also exposed Richard Thornhill's attempts to pervert justice. The lawyer filed papers with courts in both Arizona and Missouri, providing evidence that Olivia Zimmerman Parker was innocent of all charges and that Richard Thornhill had knowingly filed false accusations. The process took months during which Olivia lived in a state of suspended anxiety, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But through it all, Nathan was her rock, steady and unwavering in his support. They worked the ranch together, building it into something stronger and more profitable. Olivia took over the bookkeeping and correspondence, freeing Nathan to focus on the physical work. She also began teaching Carlos to read and write, something that brought her immense joy and reminded her of her original dream of being a teacher. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Olivia learned to love the harsh beauty of the desert, to appreciate the way the landscape changed with the seasons. She became friends with the wives of other ranchers in the area, women who accepted her without judgment and taught her the practical skills she needed to thrive in this unforgiving environment. And every night, she fell asleep in Nathan's arms, grateful beyond words for the love and safety he provided. In the early spring of 1879, nearly a year after Olivia had first arrived in Old Tucson, Benjamin Crawford arrived at the ranch with news. He rode up at midday, his horse moving at a quick trot, and Nathan and Olivia met him on the porch with a mixture of hope and dread. "It is over," Crawford said without preamble, a broad smile splitting his face. "The Missouri courts have officially dismissed all charges against Mrs. Parker. Furthermore, they have issued a warrant for Richard Thornhill's arrest for filing false charges and attempting to suborn witnesses. He is facing significant legal consequences, and his reputation is in tatters. He will not be bothering you again." Olivia felt her knees go weak, and Nathan's arm came around her waist, supporting her. "It is really over," she whispered, afraid to believe it. "It is really over," Crawford confirmed. "You are free, Mrs. Parker, free to live your life without looking over your shoulder." That night, Nathan took Olivia back to the overlook where he had first proposed, and they watched the sunset together as they had done so many times before. But this time, everything was different. This time, there was no shadow hanging over them, no threat waiting in the darkness. They were simply Nathan and Olivia Parker, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. "I am thinking about how strange life is," Olivia said. "A year ago I was running for my life, terrified and alone. I thought my life was over, that I would never be safe or happy again. And now look at me. I have a home, a husband I love more than I ever thought possible, and a future that is actually mine to choose. It feels like a miracle." "Not a miracle," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just love. Just two stubborn people who refuse to give up on each other." "I love you," Olivia said, turning to look at him. "I do not think I say it enough, but I do. I love you so much, Nathan Parker." "I love you too, Olivia Parker. And I am going to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." True to his word, Nathan devoted himself to making Olivia happy. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the territory. They added more cattle, hired more hands, and eventually built a larger house to accommodate their growing success. But more importantly, they built a life filled with love and laughter, and the kind of deep contentment that comes from finding your place in the world. In the winter of 1879, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan on Christmas morning, watching his face transform with joy and awe. He held her gently, as if she might break, and promised her that he would be the best father their child could ask for. Olivia had no doubt that he would keep that promise. Their son was born in late August of 1880, arriving during a thunderstorm that rolled across the desert with spectacular fury. Olivia labored through the night with the help of a midwife from town and Nathan at her side, refusing to leave despite the midwife's insistence that childbirth was no place for a husband. When the baby finally arrived, perfect and squalling with indignation at being forced into the world, Nathan wept openly, cradling his son with hands that were almost comically large compared to the tiny infant. They named him Thomas Nathan Parker, after Nathan's father, and from the moment of his birth, Thomas became the center of their universe. Olivia discovered reserves of love she had not known she possessed, marveling at the tiny person who depended on her for everything. Nathan was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, changing his diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply watching him sleep. As Thomas grew, he brought new life to the ranch. Miguel and Carlos doted on him, teaching him Spanish words and making him toys from scrap wood. The ranch hands competed to see who could make the baby smile, and Mrs. Patterson, who had become a regular visitor to the ranch, appointed herself Thomas's honorary grandmother. The child was surrounded by love, growing up in an environment where he was valued and cherished by everyone he met. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Olivia found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and in the spring of 1883, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth Parker. Where Thomas had been loud and demanding from the start, Sarah was quiet and observant, studying the world with serious eyes that seemed far too wise for an infant. Nathan was completely smitten with his daughter, carrying her everywhere and making up silly songs that made her giggle. Life continued to evolve and change. Miguel eventually retired from active ranch work, though he stayed on as an advisor and friend. Carlos married a young woman from town and built a house on ranch land, starting his own family while continuing to work with the horses he loved. Nathan and Olivia added to their property, carefully expanding the ranch while maintaining its sustainability. They became pillars of the Old Tucson community, respected for their hard work and known for their generosity to neighbors in need. Olivia never forgot the fear and desperation that had brought her to Arizona. But over time, those memories lost their sharp edges, becoming simply part of her story rather than the defining element of her life. She occasionally thought of Richard Thornhill, wondering what had become of him after his disgrace. From what Benjamin Crawford had told her, Richard had lost much of his wealth and influence in the scandal, and had eventually left St. Louis in shame. Olivia felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a distant sadness for the waste of it all. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had traveled beyond Arizona and the neighboring territories since their marriage, and Olivia was both excited and nervous about venturing so far from home. They left Thomas and Sarah in the care of Mrs. Patterson and made the journey by train, marveling at how the landscape changed as they moved west. San Francisco was overwhelming after the quiet simplicity of ranch life, but Olivia loved it. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended the theater. Nathan bought her a beautiful dress in the latest fashion, insisting that she deserved something frivolous and impractical. They walked along the waterfront hand in hand, talking about their dreams for the future and the life they were building together. On their last night in the city, they stood on the hotel balcony looking out at the lights spread below them. Nathan pulled Olivia close, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling utterly content. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked quietly. "Leaving your old life behind, ending up in a small frontier town instead of the big city you came from?" Olivia turned in his arms to look at him, seeing her own reflection in his eyes. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "That life was not really mine. It was something imposed on me by other people's expectations and society's demands. This life, our life, is the one I chose, and it is more than I ever imagined possible." "I am glad you took that stagecoach to Old Tucson," Nathan said, kissing her softly. "I am glad you were brave enough to run, to start over, to take a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than money. I am glad you were stubborn enough to offer me a future when all I could see was my past," Olivia replied. "You saved me, Nathan, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected. "That is how love works." They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, eager to see their children and get back to the work they loved. Thomas, now 8 years old, had grown noticeably in their absence, and Sarah, at 5, had 1,000 questions about their trip. The family settled back into their familiar routines, but something had shifted for Olivia. The trip had shown her how far she had come from the frightened woman who had fled St. Louis, how completely she had transformed into this new version of herself. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas proved to have his father's gift with animals and his mother's head for business, already showing signs that he would one day be a worthy successor to the ranch. Sarah was quieter but no less capable, with a fierce intelligence and a compassionate heart that drew people to her. Both children attended the school that had been established in Old Tucson, and Olivia took immense pride in their academic achievements. In the summer of 1890, the Parker family faced their first significant crisis in years. A drought had settled over the territory, lasting for months and threatening the survival of many ranches. Water sources dried up, and cattle began to die. Nathan worked tirelessly to keep the ranch going, drilling new wells and moving the herd to wherever grazing could be found. Olivia managed the finances with a careful eye, stretching their resources to cover the needs of both the ranch and their employees. It was a difficult time, filled with worry and exhaustion, but it also brought out the best in the community. Neighbors helped each other, sharing resources and information about where water and grass could be found. The Parkers opened their wells to smaller ranchers who had lost their water sources, and in turn, those ranchers helped with the back-breaking work of keeping the cattle alive. When the rains finally came in late fall, drenching the parched earth and filling the creek beds, there was a collective sense of relief and gratitude. The drought had taken its toll. They had lost some cattle and depleted their financial reserves. But the ranch had survived, and so had their family. Nathan and Olivia stood together on the porch one evening after the first real rain, watching water drip from the roof and listening to the grateful earth drinking it in. "We made it through," Nathan said, pulling Olivia close. "I was not sure we would, but we did." "We will always make it through," Olivia replied. "As long as we are together, we can face anything." As the new century approached, bringing with it changes that would transform the West forever, the Parkers continued to thrive. Thomas, now a young man of 19, took on more responsibility at the ranch, working alongside his father with a confidence and competence that made both parents proud. Sarah, at 16, was showing an interest in medicine, inspired by the territorial doctor who had treated various injuries and illnesses over the years. Olivia supported her daughter's ambitions, even though she knew it would be a difficult path for a woman. In the spring of 1900, as the Parker family gathered to celebrate the new century, Olivia looked around at the faces she loved most in the world and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Nathan, now in his 40s but still strong and vital, his face lined by sun and time but his eyes as warm and loving as ever. Thomas, so much like his father it sometimes took her breath away. And Sarah, beautiful and intelligent with her whole life ahead of her. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, catching her reflective mood. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Olivia said. "How that frightened woman who stepped off the stagecoach 22 years ago could never have imagined this life, this family, this love. I am thinking about how grateful I am that you saw something worth saving in me, something worth fighting for. I saw a brave, intelligent, beautiful woman who deserved a chance at happiness," Nathan said. "And I am grateful every day that you chose to build that happiness with me." Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, his young voice strong and clear. "To the past that made us and the future we will create." "To family," they echoed, their voices blending together in perfect harmony. As the evening wore on and the candles burned low, Olivia found herself standing on the porch again, looking out at the desert she had come to love. The moon was rising, painting the landscape in shades of silver, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the night. She heard footsteps behind her and felt Nathan's arms come around her waist, pulling her back against his chest in a gesture as familiar and comforting as breathing. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, covering his hands with hers. "This life, this family, this love, it is everything I never knew I needed." They stood there together, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something enduring and beautiful. The stagecoach that had brought Olivia to Old Tucson all those years ago had carried her away from a past filled with fear and obligation. But it had also carried her toward a future filled with love, purpose, and a happiness that grew deeper with each passing year. As Thomas married a young woman from a neighboring ranch in 1902 and began building a home of his own on Parker land, and as Sarah prepared to leave for medical school back east, pursuing her dreams with the same determination her mother had shown all those years ago, Olivia and Nathan faced these changes together. The ranch continued to evolve, adopting new techniques and technologies while maintaining the values that had always been its foundation. In the quiet evenings when it was just the two of them again, echoing their early days together, Olivia and Nathan would sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. They reminisced about the adventures they had shared, the obstacles they had overcome, and the love that had sustained them through it all. Nathan's hair had turned silver, and Olivia had laugh lines around her eyes, but to each other, they were still the young man who had offered hope and the frightened woman who had found the courage to accept it. "You know what I realized the other day?" Nathan said one evening as they watched another spectacular desert sunset. "What is that?" "That I fell in love with you the moment I saw you in that hotel dining room. You looked so lost and so brave at the same time, and something in me just knew that you were going to change my life." Olivia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I was terrified of you at first. You were so confident and kind, and I was not sure I deserved either. But you made me believe that I could have a future, that I could be more than just a woman running from her past." "You were always more than that," Nathan said firmly. "You just needed the space and safety to discover it for yourself." As the years continued to pass, the Parker Ranch became something of a legend in the territory, known not just for its success, but for the family that had built it with such dedication and love. When Thomas and his wife welcomed their first child in 1904, making Nathan and Olivia grandparents, the joy that filled the ranch was palpable. They named the baby boy Nathan, honoring his grandfather, and as Olivia held her grandson for the first time, she was overcome with emotion at the generational legacy they had created. Sarah, true to her ambitions, became a doctor and eventually returned to Arizona to establish a practice in Old Tucson. She married a fellow physician she had met during her studies, and they built a life serving the community that had supported Sarah's dreams. The pride that Nathan and Olivia felt in their daughter's accomplishments was immense, and they never tired of telling anyone who would listen about Dr. Sarah Parker Morrison and her groundbreaking work in women's health. In 1910, as Nathan and Olivia celebrated 32 years of marriage, they threw a party at the ranch that drew people from all over the territory. Friends and family gathered to honor the couple who had become such an integral part of the community. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, gave a speech about the frightened young woman she had taken a chance on all those years ago and the remarkable woman she had become. "I knew from the moment I met her that Olivia was special," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "She had been through things that would have broken most people, but she refused to stay broken. And when Nathan Parker walked into her life, I knew he was exactly what she needed, a good man who saw her strength even when she could not see it herself. Together, they have built something that will last for generations, a legacy of love and hard work and commitment to family and community. We are all better for having them in our lives." As the party continued into the night, filled with music and laughter and dancing under the stars, Olivia found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about that terrified woman on the stagecoach, clutching her meager possessions and praying for a miracle. She thought about Nathan's smile the first time they met, about the way he had offered her hope when she had none. She thought about the challenges they had faced together, the drought and the threats from her past, and the simple daily struggles of building a life in an unforgiving land. But mostly, she thought about the love that had sustained them through everything. The deep, abiding love that had grown stronger with each passing year, that had weathered every storm and celebrated every joy. That love had been the foundation upon which they had built their entire lives, and it remained as strong now as it had been on the day they first confessed their feelings to each other on that desert overlook. Nathan found her standing alone, looking up at the stars, and came to stand beside her. He did not need to ask what she was thinking. After 3 decades together, he could read her moods as easily as she could read his. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Not a single one," Olivia replied, taking his hand. "You gave me everything I never knew I wanted, Nathan. A home, a family, a purpose. But most of all, you gave me yourself, your love, and your faith in me. That has been the greatest gift of all." "The gift was mutual," Nathan said, bringing her hand to his lips. "You made my life complete in ways I cannot even begin to express. Every day with you has been an adventure, and I look forward to all the adventures still to come." They stood together under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the sounds of celebration, two souls who had found each other across the barriers of circumstance and fear. The stagecoach that had brought Olivia to Old Tucson had carried her toward a destiny she could never have imagined, toward a love that had transformed her from a victim of her past into the author of her own future. As the years rolled on and they grew older together, their love only deepened. They faced the inevitable losses that come with age, saying goodbye to friends like Mrs. Patterson and Miguel, mourning their passing while celebrating the impact they had on so many lives. But through every loss, Nathan and Olivia had each other, and that made even grief bearable. In 1920, as they celebrated their 42nd anniversary, Nathan and Olivia stood once again on the porch of the ranch house, now surrounded by a growing family that included grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The ranch had evolved with the times, incorporating automobiles and modern equipment while maintaining its core values and commitment to the land. "Can you believe it has been 42 years?" Olivia marveled, her hand finding Nathan's with the ease of long practice. "Best 42 years of my life," Nathan replied, his voice perhaps not as strong as it once was, but still filled with the warmth and love that had always defined him. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat, even the scary parts. Even facing down those investigators and surviving the drought, and all the times we were not sure we would make it. Especially those parts," Nathan said firmly. "Those were the times that proved what we had was real and lasting. Anyone can love someone when things are easy. But we loved each other through the hard times, and that made all the difference." As the sun set on another day in their remarkable life together, painting the desert in those familiar shades of gold and crimson, Olivia realized that their story was so much more than just an escape from the past, or a romance that had blossomed against the odds. It was a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to the courage it takes to start over, and to the beauty that can emerge when two people commit to building a future together. The stagecoach had brought her to Old Tucson, carrying her away from everything she had known. But it had also brought her home, to a place she had not known she was looking for, to a man who saw her not as broken or damaged, but as strong and worthy of love. Together, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of love and family and commitment to each other, and to the land they had made their own. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, one by one like tiny promises of hope, Olivia Zimmerman Parker knew with absolute certainty that every difficult step of her journey had been worth it. The fear, the running, the uncertainty, all of it had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life that exceeded her wildest dreams. She had traveled by stagecoach to escape her past, and a cowboy had met her and offered a future instead. And what a future it had been, filled with more love and joy and purpose than she ever thought possible. It was a story worth living, worth remembering, worth passing down to the generations that would come after them. "I love you," she whispered to Nathan, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," he replied, his arm coming around her shoulders in that familiar, comforting gesture. "Always have, always will." And there, under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the legacy they had built together, Nathan and Olivia Parker stood hand in hand, two hearts that had found each other across time and circumstance and had chosen to beat as one. Their story was one of courage and transformation, of love conquering fear, of two broken people healing each other and becoming whole. It was a story that would live on in the memories of their children and grandchildren, a testament to the enduring power of love and the unshakable strength that comes from finding your true home, not in a place, but in another person's heart. The ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Nathan and Olivia had laid. The values they had instilled, hard work, integrity, compassion, and above all, love, became the bedrock upon which the family built their lives. And always, in quiet moments when the desert wind whispered through the mesquite trees and the sun painted the sky in impossible colors, those who came after could feel the presence of the two people who had started it all, who had proved that sometimes the best way to escape your past is to run toward your future with open arms and an open heart.